Hello and welcome. My name is Whitney and I'm an anesthesia intern documenting my journey as I go through my first year of residency. I just finished up my first week of nights and I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. If you've watched my other videos, you know that during my first week of a new block, I usually just go over kind of the general overview of what the week looked like. Usually during my first week, I'm really just learning kind of like the nuts and bolts logistics of the rotation. So that's really all that I have to talk about today. So we will go ahead and jump into it. And at the end, as always, I'll go over how many hours I actually worked this week. So let's get into it. All right, so to talk about the logistics of working nights, I'll first just say that at our program, we have two blocks of nights throughout the year. So currently on my first one, and each of them are 3 weeks long. So I'll have 3 weeks of nights now, and then 3 weeks of nights later on in the year. While we're on nights, we are working with the internal medicine residency. So I am working as if I was like an internal medicine intern. So I'm doing exactly what they're doing, and I'm working with those interns and those residents. So for us, the each week consists of 5 shifts, and each shift is 12 hours long. So we get in at 6:30 p.m. and that is when sign out occurs. Sign out is actually really important for the night team because that is when we learn all about the patients that are being taken care of by the day teams. So there are about 6 day teams that are taking care of patients during the day. And they are the teams that are responsible for really pushing the patient care forward. Like they're the ones who really know like everything about the patients. They're the ones ordering all the tests, ordering, like imaging and labs and everything like that. And they're doing the treatments and they're doing all these things based off of the results. So they're really the ones who are pushing the patient's care forward. And as the night team, there's not really a lot of that going on. The night team is responsible for really just getting them through the night. So we are responsible for something called cross coverage, where if there's an immediate problem that a patient is having, we will be the ones to fix it. But otherwise, we're really not doing much in terms of patient care as much as the day team is, just because as the night team, we're taking care of all of the patients, not just like a subset of them. So we're really just stepping in for when like emergencies or kind of immediate things happen. To put some numbers on it and to have some perspective, I'll just say that, like the day teams, they probably have on average like 8 to 12 patients. And on each team, there's like 2 to 3 interns who are really responsible for like knowing everything about the patients. And that's a pretty doable thing to know like 4 to 6 patients really well. And as the night team, we are just one team and we're responsible for knowing all the patients on there. So, right. So we'll say like 8 to 12 patients per team, and then there's 6 teams. So that's like 50 to 60 patients. And there's only like 4 to 5 people on the night team. So it's really hard to be able to know everything about a patient, even as, like we're learning about them through sign out. It we really can't do much about, like pushing the patient's care forward. We're really just there to help like if something comes up. This is why sign out is so important because this is the opportunity that the day team has to tell the night team anything important about the patient that we should know before they leave for the day. So usually how this works is each team will come to sign out with a physical paper that lists all of the patients that they have, and they'll just really quickly go through each one saying like this patient is like however many old and they're here for this problem, and then they'll tell us just a little bit of information more that we might find useful overnight. So usually this is something like if the patient had some kind of problem during the day, like if their blood pressure kept dropping or something, something that we might have to work on overnight, they should be telling us. Like it's kind of their responsibility as the day team to warn us of any problems that the patient might have. Now, obviously, like you can't guess what kind of problems a patient might have overnight. So they can't say like everything, but if there's like a known problem, they should be telling us what we should be looking out for and what we should do if that problem comes up. because like they're the ones who really know the patient and they're going to be the ones to know what to do, while us, we're really just going off this piece of paper, and if something comes up, maybe a quick chart review, but we're not going to know the patients as well. So it's really important that they give us that kind of information. Along with that, they also should tell us if there's any kind of lab or imaging or anything that we need to follow up on, right? Because sometimes there's something that maybe the day team was waiting for all day. This especially comes up with like imaging. Sometimes it just takes a long time to have imaging done and then someone to actually like read the images and have a report on it. But sometimes that's really important that the patient's treatment might change based on that kind of stuff. So in addition to telling us like what kind of problems we might anticipate overnight, they're also responsible for telling us if we do need to follow up on anything. So I would say the main things that we would have to follow up on are things like imaging, like I mentioned before, or lab results. Like let's say someone's blood levels were kind of low throughout the day. Usually you check that with something called an H&H, which is a hemoglobin hematocrit level, and that's just a lab. So it's like a blood draw that we do. And sometimes people need, like transfusions based off of this. So we would be the ones responsible for checking up on it, but it's really the day team's job to tell us to check up on it. Part that I just went over, that is something that we call cross coverage, where the night team is really just dealing with problems as they come up with patients and following up on any kind of like last minute things that the day team wasn't able to follow up on, usually just because of timing, not because they like left work for us. I don't want to make it sound like that. But yeah, so some of the problems that we saw with cross coverage, a big one was not being able to sleep. Like a lot of patients would have issues sleeping in the hospital, which I mean, who wouldn't? It's such a hard place to sleep in all honesty. So that was one that came up. Pain was something else that came up pretty often, being nauseous as well. So nothing like huge, but things that a patient could be like uncomfortable with. So those are things where we would just kind of like step in and then just kind of treat symptomatically. There were a couple of things like shortness of breath, which on things like that, we really have to know what's going on because that can be a little bit more serious. So in those kind of cases, we might do a quick little workup, but otherwise we were really just treating symptoms as they were coming up. So yeah, that was one part of the night team. And I will say with where I'm training at now, that was usually more of the senior residents' responsibility. Like they were the one holding the phone that nurses would call if there were any of these kind of questions or concerns. And I would say for the majority of the time, they were the ones kind of fielding those questions. There were a couple of times though where they had to like leave the phone or they were busy. So as interns, we would be responsible for doing that as well. But I wouldn't say that was like very often. I would say it was pretty rare. But I do think it's a really good learning opportunity. So I feel like I would try to listen in and like hear what they would do about it. Just because, like they know what to do in those kind of situations and I didn't always know what to do. So it's just really helpful to actually learn and listen. So cross coverage was one component of working night. And like I said, that's usually what the seniors would do. So as interns, what we were responsible for was actually admitting patients. And I have a whole video dedicated to like what actually admitting is and what goes into it. But the general gist of it is admitting is when we actually hospitalize a patient, and it's kind of like the first part of them coming into the hospital after they've been in the emergency room. And as interns, we have a cap of admitting 4 patients at night, which I actually think is very fair because it usually works out to like an average of 3 hours with each patient to admit them, and that's a lot of time. Some patients are really complex, and I feel like I actually need the full 3 hours, but other patients are really straightforward, and I feel like you can get it done in like an hour at tops, at most. So it really just depends. But yeah, 4 admissions in 12 hours is actually very doable, in my opinion. So that's really all that the nights entailed. As interns, we were really just focused on admitting patients and like answering a cross coverage phone call once in a while in case we needed to. But for us, I felt like we were kept pretty busy by admitting patients because it involves like chart review, going to talk to the patient, physical exams, and then coming up with the note and presentations. So yeah, we were pretty busy during the night. and we were just working on admitting patients. And then at the very end of the night, we would staff with the attending. And I've talked about this in other videos, but just as a quick reminder, that just means, we're just talking or giving a presentation to the attending who's like the top of the hierarchy physician. And we're just giving a presentation about like what brought them in, what lab findings have we found, and then going over the assessment and plan, which is like the treatment portion of what we're doing. And usually at this time, they'll kind of tweak our treatment plans if any kind of like changes need to be made. And then the night's over and we go to sign out at in the morning at 6:30 a.m. So at sign out, at this point, it looks kind of the same as like when the day team signs out to the night team. When we're signing out to the day team, we're telling them about anything that came up overnight. So if a patient had, like issues with sleeping or if they were nauseous, like any of those small or big problems, we would tell them about it. And that's only because, like if for some reason, if these problems keep happening, we kind of have a track record of that. And we know that they might need to have a change in management to help with that kind of stuff. So that's really just the point of that. And so that's one thing we would do at sign out. In addition, we would also sign out the patients we admitted overnight to the day team. So, like I said before, the day team, they're really the ones pushing the patient's care forward. So, we need to give a good history and physical to the day team so they can understand everything about the patient that we know. And the day team is responsible for going with them every day while they're in the hospital. And yeah, so we just have to make sure that we give all the information that we can. One thing I really like about this model of working on nights is that I feel like by not having to follow up on patients, I'm seeing a lot more patients in the same amount of time. So I'm seeing a lot of new problems. And I don't know, I feel like I'm getting reps in of, just like patient care and some common problems, some different problems. So I feel like I'm learning a lot on this, which has been really fun. All right. Well, that is really all that I have to say about working my first week of nights. I still feel like I'm kind of adjusting to the schedule. I am pretty sleepy working nights. But maybe I'll talk about that in my video next week, just to talk about like what I'm trying to do to kind of switch my schedule from a day schedule to like a night schedule. But we will go ahead and end this video by looking at how many hours I worked this week. So I will go ahead and just move over to the side and pull it up here. So, yep, like I said before, it is 5 shifts a week. I unfortunately did not get to have 2 nights off in a row, so I had them kind of two spaced out. Sunday was technically would have been my very first night of the week, but that's one of the nights I got off, so I got to start a little bit later. And so, yeah, I worked 5 other shifts that week. My days off were Sunday and Wednesday, and I worked a total of 60 hours. One thing that's kind of nice about this rotation is even though I don't feel like I'm ever going to leave early, it is really nice that I don't have to like come in early. So truly like it is a 6:30 to 6:30 schedule, which I really really appreciate. It ended up being 60 hours and it honestly wasn't too bad. I don't know. I kind of like working nights, so the 60 hours didn't feel too bad, but we'll see. We're only one week down. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming along with me. I will see you next week when I am finished with my second week of nights. So go ahead and I'll see you then. Take care.